We have multiple Toronto Raptors trade updates, as there are a lot of valuable trade pieces the Raptors have in store ahead of this year's trade deadline that reports have already come out that teams across the NBA are interested in prying away from this Raptors group. So we're going to take a look at what the Raptors approach to this year's trade deadline, how they're feeling about the roster, how they're feeling about the players in this group, and what it means for moves ahead of this year's trade deadline. So lots of updates, lots of stuff to break down in this video. Before we dive into that, folks, we have a very exciting announcement, as this video is brought to you by Rentals.ca, who are proud partners of Team Canada. While they've been supporting our national team defend their home court in international competition, they've been helping thousands of Canadians find their home court all across the country, whether you're in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, Halifax, Winnipeg, Mississauga, Edmonton, Victoria, St. John's, from coast to coast. Rentals.ca helps you find the perfect place and price for you. Their website's clean, it's extremely easy to use, and you can pinpoint exactly on the map where you're interested in moving, and Rentals.ca will help you find the perfect spot. Whether it's a house, apartment, a condo, whatever it is, Rentals.ca will help you find the best option as Canada's largest apartment hunting network. So shout out to Rentals.ca. And their link is in the pinned comment as well as the description down below. But shout out to Rentals.ca for supporting this channel, for supporting our national team, that Team Canada Hoops, but most importantly, supporting thousands and thousands of Canadians all across the country. So definitely check them out in the pinned comment, because frankly, they're an awesome place if you're looking for anywhere to move. But let's dive into the latest. Let's dive into the latest trade updates, because this team is in a very interesting spot for this upcoming season. Because of course, Masai Ujiri is he has a lot of tools in his arsenal right now in terms of how this team is able to sort of approach this year's deadline. And the biggest name that people are kind of turning their heads, whether it's across the NBA or Toronto Raptors fans, is Jakob Poeltl, because he has really emerged this season as a top-tier center out there in the NBA. Taking a look at his stats, averaging 16 points per game, 11 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 1.3 blocks, 1.1 steals, shooting 59% from the field, and is only 29 years old. So it's a guy that a ton of teams across the league would be interested in bringing in, and frankly could net the Toronto Raptors a ton of value. But of course, this team, as we know, as we watch the games, it's getting more clear by the day. The Raptors are trying to capture that flag. That's the reality of it. That's what we were told entering this season. The Raptors are in year one of a rebuild. So Jakob Poeltl, he's 29, so he's not old, he's not washed, he's not over the hill by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not in his early 20s, a young prospect like that by any stretch. So it's a weird line, because he fits really, really well what the Raptors are trying to do. There's a hole at the center position if he's gone, so he is an immensely valuable piece for this team, and will be as this team continues to develop, improve for upcoming seasons. But of course, there's that whole mantra in terms of trades, in terms of whether it's sports or whatever the heck it is. You buy low, you sell high. And Jakob Poeltl is currently at a high right now. And some fans are calling for him to be traded, but they look at it, it's like, oh, we have 5 more years of prime Jakob Poeltl. Why deal him away right now when he's proven to be very effective? Well, we now have some insight in terms of what the front office actually thinks of this whole situation, as Grange revealed that at his age and his number, I believe sources I've talked to who project he's more likely to be a part of the Raptors' bounce back next season and beyond, rather than being dangled ahead of the trade deadline for whatever combination of young talent and draft assets a rebuilding team might be hunting for. With Barnes, Immanuel Quickley already on long-term deals, it's hard to imagine the Raptors having another lottery-focused season a year from now. The goal is to swoop in, get lucky in the lottery this summer, and hopefully start pushing to get back into contention in a very shaky Eastern Conference next season. So Grange went on to say that Poeltl would help the cause next year and beyond. But But here's where things get interesting. Poeltl will be both extension eligible this summer, and he can tack on another 3 years to his existing deal, a number that would start at about $27 million per season, and be a year from free agency. If you are representing Poeltl, wouldn't you want some kind of assurance that the Raptors are seriously interested in getting an extension done next summer if he's a part of their long-term vision? So again, looking at the stats, $27 million does not seem that outrageous for a center in the prime of his career, putting up 16, 11, playing phenomenal defense, and the impact is felt every single night when Jakob Poeltl when he's not in the lineup, the team generally loses, and it's a pretty ugly loss, especially on the defensive end, and he's been a very effective diver the way he positions himself, gets into that dunker spot, even if he's not dunking every single time, his just positioning and, awareness on the offensive end in terms of where to be to create that space. It's been really, really it's been eye-opening in terms of how a guy that can't really shoot threes, that can't be that crazy lob threat, is just so able to make space. And that was my one concern about Jakob Poeltl, but he's finishing around the rim well. He's doing a lot of stuff out there on the court. He has that float jump shot from the, 5 to 10 foot range away from the basket. That's really effective. And he is just proving that he deserves, extension that could be around that range. So again, I don't expect him to test free agency if that extension is on the table. I imagine if the Toronto Raptors are willing to not trade him at the deadline, that this summer an extension would be incoming for Jakob Poeltl. So that's the kind of direction. Again, we still have a long season to go. We got a couple months ahead of the trade deadline. Things can definitely change. Things can definitely adjust. But I'm a big fan of Jakob Poeltl, and I'm happy that the team isn't just going to dangle him for nothing. Now, if some team is willing to offer 3 first-round picks, something crazy, something lucrative for Poeltl, then maybe that's a different discussion. But of course, you got to play with things by ear. You can't just be rigid unless you have a top 5 player in the NBA. It's everyone's sort of available, but I'm happy the Raptors aren't just trying to shop him, because we've seen how bad a team that's trying to compete, trying to contend without an actual true center in their lineup. It's tough to do. All right, we've seen it through the last era of Toronto Raptors basketball before Poeltl was in the lineup, but now I'm happy that the team is fairly invested in him. But a couple other guys on the roster where trade rumors have been escalating in terms of other teams: Chris Boucher, Kelly Olynyk, and Grange reveals some insights in terms of how the Raptors are feeling at this point now as well. But actually, we do have an update on the market for centers, which does apply to Chris Boucher, Kelly Olynyk, and Jakob Poeltl. But complicating things is that the market for centers, especially those that didn't spread the floor offensively or shoot free throws particularly well, is a little crowded at the moment, with Nikola Vucevic, Jonas Valanciunas, Robert Williams, and DeAndre Ayton are just some of the names that have been popping up. Poeltl is probably the best of those options, but teams do have options, which means the Raptors won't likely expect a king's ransom if they were to decide to make a trade. And as soon as he's gone, the Raptors will be in the market for a quality big man anchor for the team going forward. All of which says it's more likely Poeltl stays than gets traded. So that's one of the things that does affect Chris Boucher, Kelly Olynyk as well, is it feels like those seasons where Masai Ujiri didn't have a center, didn't have a true big man out there on the roster. Big men were very hard to come by, and that's why Jakob Poeltl at the time, despite being an expiring contract, was fairly expensive for the Toronto Raptors. Had to give up 2 valuable second-round picks as well as a first-round pick to bring in Poeltl, and he wasn't playing as well as he's playing right now. But at those times, the center markets were pretty dried up. But as we saw from that list, there are a lot of players available out there in the open market at the center position, which frankly makes it tougher for the Toronto Raptors to be able to get a crazy haul for a Jakob Poeltl or for any of these different guys. Now, if players get traded, teams strike out, and they're still needing of a center, then that's when you can kind of swoop in. That's where you have to be smart with your negotiations, with everything that's going on. But it's not as dry of a market at the center position as it has been in previous seasons. So that's something to factor in, but we do have updates on these guys as well in terms of Chris Boucher. So the lanky Montrealer has shown some nice glimpses this season, and but the roster's gotten healthier. Boucher is back to where he was a season ago, on the fringes of Darko Rajakovic's rotation. Given he turns 32 in January and he's in the last year of his contract, it's hard to imagine the Raptors will be standing in the way of a Boucher trade. So that's what Grange says in terms of his intel on a Boucher trade. And then in terms of a Kelly Olynyk update, but here's the thing. With Kelly Olynyk rumored to be a possible trade target for a number of playoff teams looking for a skilled playmaking big to bolster their bench unit, he ended up in Toronto, and that's when he was a pending free agent. Olynyk is still rounding into shape after missing the first 23 games of the season with a back problem, but even presuming he returns to the form he showed last season, it's fair to wonder whether there's a significant market for a 33-year-old who now has another $13.4 million contract extension and signed just after joining the Raptors last season, and can struggle defensively at this stage of his career. Now, Chris Boucher has been a bit more solid for this team in terms of stats. Don't have the numbers brought up. Yeah, here we go. Chris Boucher averaging 10 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, as 0.7 blocks per game. The 3-point percentage is a little bit down, but again, there's been certain games where he hasn't been in the rotation a ton. He is hot certain nights, and he is cold certain nights. It's been the reality with Chris Boucher over the past couple seasons, but I think it's easy for the Raptors to net back at least a couple seconds for Chris Boucher with how effective he's been out there on the court on both ends of the floor this season. Kelly Olynyk, there isn't enough of sample size. He hasn't been great since he's returned to action, but what do you expect from an older player that's returning from injuries? So We'll see how all that stuff shakes out, but I do imagine that we'll see some moves from the Toronto Raptors that move in a rebuilding direction, but I don't expect Jakob Poeltl to be at the center of those. I'm sure there's going to be rumors. I'm sure there's going to be teams offering pretty significant, realistic, reasonable packages for Jakob Poeltl, but of course, it's up to Masai Ujiri to really figure out what's the right move for this Raptor squad. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. You guys are the best thing as far. Again, if you made it this far in the video, you made 10 minutes out here talking Raptors, and you guys still haven't hit the subscribe button, you're part of the 67%. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Anyways, you guys are the best. I'm signing out.